Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Movie Mates video. I am Matthew, joined by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Callum.
Hey man, lovely to see you. So on today's show, we've got another Overdue review, and this time it's of the 2020 film Love and Monsters, starring Dylan O'Brien and Jessica Henwick. Now, we've reviewed a lot of like sort of apocalyptic films, sci-fi films, those kind of things. And this film's a really interesting one because it's kind of a really nice blend of a lot of different genres. In some instances it's a rom-com, in some instances it's like an all-out action. So, but yeah, did you hear much about this film, Bud, last year? Because I think it was one of those ones that went straight to digital, wasn't it?
I think it maybe had a brief theatrical release, but yeah, I
Mhm.
do know it was released in sort of the back end of 2020. So the first thing I heard about this was maybe 2 weeks ago. I'm
Okay.
not sure from where, but as soon as I heard about it, as soon as I heard that Jessica Henwick was in a
Yeah.
a film that I was able to
I
watch,
love it.
of course, that was added to the list of required watching.
Of
So
course, of course.
that's sort of when I put the idea to you. Had you heard of it before? I mentioned it.
I absolutely hadn't, Bud, and I'm really glad you decided to review it on the channel for us because I absolutely love it. It's so good, and yeah, it's one of the more surprising films I've watched recently. So, but yeah, just before we kick off today's episode, thanks very much to everyone who supported us recently. Calm and I really do appreciate that massively. And stay tuned this week. We've got a lot of content coming, including a Riverdale review with our best bud Cash. So yeah, it's been a while since we've had Cash on, so it's going to be a good week for the channel. Full spoilers for this film, even though there's not much to talk spoilery about, so don't worry about that. But yeah, full spoilers, of course. So I'll just happy to go
Yeah,
by your notes,
I
bud.
yeah, any sort of like road trip kind of film doesn't really have much depth
Yeah.
of content. It's more
Hmm.
just what you see is what you get. You
Absolutely.
pretty much can predict the beats of the film, so I don't think anything we say is going to massively surprise anyone, even if you haven't seen the film.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, has there been an overdue review so far that either of us have actually enjoyed? From memory, there
Oh.
was New Mutants, which was all right. There was Tenet, which was dreadful. Like, what are the other ones that we've covered?
Bill and Ted 3. Did we like
Bill and
that?
Ted, it was all
It was
right.
okay. Yeah. 2020 was a rough year for movies, I think.
It was a rough year.
It was a rough
Even
year.
like even for the ones, because people say 2020 was a rough year for films, and by that they mean not a lot came out, and the ones that did weren't great. But also
Hmm.
the ones that didn't come out and then were eventually released to digital were also not that great. So
Yeah, no,
clearly the
literally, I know.
filmmaking, I feel like even if the year had gone as normal, people would have said the same.
It's kind of like a poison chalice, isn't it? So, but yeah, like this film, obviously we've mentioned starring Dylan O'Brien and Jessica. Every time I say that name, of course we know someone by that name, so it makes it even stranger. It kind of feels
Oh
like
yeah,
he's in this film. But yeah, Dylan O'Brien and Jessica Henwick, and yeah, especially Jessica Henwick, like she's a great actress, of course, from Iron Fist as well. So,
of course.
but yeah, I'm just happy to go by your notes, buddy, and I'll chip in where I can.
So I think a big part of any monster film, which obviously this is in obviously even just looking at the name of the film, monsters are going to play a big deal.
Hmm.
So of course you think, what are these monsters going to look like? And initially I was looking forward to sort of inventive creature design, because a lot of recent ones of sort of the 21st century have been a bit uninspired. I'd say we haven't seen too many, but it's rare that you get sort of a monster film that isn't an alien.
Yeah,
Because
exactly. Yeah,
if you think
it's a
to
good
like
point.
Edge of Tomorrow, that's sort of an uninspired design, but those are aliens. I
Mhm.
would say the only exceptions really to big style monsters are sort of like King Kong and Godzilla.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Both of
Yeah, for
which are sort
sure.
of land based ones, and the films which I'm sure we'll be covering in the next few weeks, because Kong v Godzilla has been moved up to March, I believe,
Oh,
from
that'll
May.
that'll
So I
replace
think we'll be talking
Morbius
about
for us anyway.
talking about those sometime soon. But with these creature designs, I was hoping for something inventive, and I was a bit disappointed to hear it in the sort of prologue to the film that they were just mutated insects and animals. But then I ended up being really impressed, with the first one that came about, because it looked incredibly practical. The rest within the film are quite heavily CGI, but the first one that appears almost looks puppeteered, and the sort of copious amount of spit pouring from
Yeah,
it
yeah,
kind of gave me
absolutely.
xenomorph vibes from Alien.
Absolutely. I actually agree with you completely, but I actually think the mix of practical effects. We see. I think the first monster is something. the first big monster is really, it's like a toad or something like that, a mutated toad, and like you see like the prosthetics of like its tongue and stuff like that. It's really well done, and of course the mix of CGI. The CGI is so good. It's so well done, especially for like a film that you wouldn't necessarily think has a massive budget, given that there's no real A-list stars in here, particularly. So yeah, it's really impressive work here. Really impressive work, and I actually think that the fact that the monsters, of course, they're the titular characters as well, but they let the human characters have the main say in the movie. You know, the monsters are definitely secondary here, which I think is a really, really smart move. And in many respects, you know, I think this is going to be a common theme in today's video. This film really reminds me of Zombieland, in the sense that in those films, the zombies are the secondary and the human characters are the priority. And I think that's what this film does so well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And you know, this film, you know, as you mentioned before, sort of is a tale of survival in the sort of vein of Zombieland, but it has, you know, the added element of it being a romantic tale,
Yeah.
even more so than Zombieland. And it sort of gave me vibes of, you know, Warm Bodies. Do you know that film with Nicholas Hoult
Yes.
and
Yes.
Teresa Palmer?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it sort of gave me that you know idea of sort of the
Really
one
good
person that's
comparison.
for you, sort of being out there in the world for you. And you know, it's a romantic tale, of course, but the other people that he loves within the film are, you know, his colony, which we see him with in the beginning of the film.
Mm-hmm.
And we find out that he is sort of the de facto chef of the group. He's the one who makes the minestrone.
Yes,
So
of
I was just
course.
wondering, we talked about recently, you know, how would you be able to survive in a zombie apocalypse? And I think here an even better question is, if you were within that colony, which skill do you think you have that would make you responsible for a certain
Ooh,
role?
I think for me, I
Of
don't
course, we've
know.
referenced that you work at McDonald's. Would you call yourself a chef?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think for me, maybe entertainment. You know, I think I could get people around a nice campfire for a few stories. You know, the
Yeah.
disappearance of DB Cooper, perhaps, if you've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, I think maybe entertainment. You know, get a few people around for some Jackbox party pack games, if that's still a thing in the apocalypse. You know,
Yeah.
I think entertainment. You know, reading books, those kind of things.
Mm.
I think that would be for me. What about you, bud? What about you?
So, like you expect to use like your good looks to just draw people to you, and then that's when you like throw
Good look.
entertainment at them.
Yes,
Yes.
sure.
Yeah. 100%. I think I would become
Oh,
the de
brilliant.
facto therapist. You know, I
Oh,
sort of find
yes,
that
good one.
people from time to time, you know, come to me with their problems, and I think I lend a good listening ear.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I think I'd be the I wouldn't say I'd you know be a dispeller of advice, because I feel like you know people usually know the right answer themselves, but I'd be the listener, because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like
It's a
people
good
would
one.
have a lot of sort of like you know base level problems that they maybe don't want to trouble everybody with, you know, when they're being
Yeah.
attacked by giant monsters. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd be the one to hear them out.
Yeah, I think that's a really good shout, bud, for sure. You're always good at that. For whenever I have a problem or something like that, you're always a nice, you know, shoulder to rely on and stuff like
Thank you,
that.
sir.
But no worries. And I think for this film, like you said, it's a tale of romance just as much as it is an apocalypse film. And I think the fact that the Dylan O'Brien character Joel, I think the fact that he's the only single one in his colony makes for some really funny moments and funny dynamics.
Mm.
And the fact, you know, anyone who's watched the podcast, I'm a huge fan of, you know, the soulmate idea, the one, you know, and I think the fact that, you know, the character of Joel is quite that way inclined as well. You know, he believes that Amy, with an I and two E's, and as the film references, you know, she is his soulmate, so to speak. And the fact that he travels like you know, across this wasteland with really dangerous creatures and no humans about is really charming. It's really romantic, and it kind of, in a way, it kind of reminds you of like the classic fairy tale of, you know, Prince Charming and stuff like that. You know, it kind of echoes those kind of vibes for me. And I think the fact that it is a romance story at heart as well, that's why I love it so much. You know, I love romance, and I think that the movie does it so well.
I mean, are you a little bit disappointed, you know, being that way inclined, you know, believing in soulmates, that you know, sort of the movie representation of that sort of portrays the main character who is that way inclined as being stupid for having that belief? Because obviously in 500 Days of Summer, you know, Tom is you know proven wrong that you know Summer was his soulmate, and you're of the opinion that it was really you know she was just a stepping stone to get to Autumn, and
Mm-hmm.
you know
Yeah.
Summer just needed him to help him grow. You know, I feel like Amy is definitely just the best option. You know, within the apocalypse, I don't think she's his soulmate, but it definitely seems to be his belief that she is. Like,
Yeah.
do you feel a bit let down by that?
It's really interesting, buddy, because I think from the film's point of view, from the filmmakers, they wanted to suggest that, in the 7 years that Amy and Joel have spent apart, she's the one that's grown up and developed. She's had relationships as well, whereas he sort of like has that childlike innocence, so to speak, of the soulmate idea. I think it's really sweet that he still has that innocence to him and he still believes in it. I think that's a real a strength of character. Do you know what I mean? And I do think
Yeah.
it's a question that I suppose we could mention it now. Like we see the fact that it's left a bit ambiguous as to whether Amy and Joel stay together. Do you think they do end up together? Because I personally thought it was a bit of a slap in the face when she didn't appreciate him, that he spent a week trying to find his soulmate, so to speak,
Yeah.
or in his mind. You know what I mean? What's your verdict?
Yeah. I mean, it was my full expectation because he was far too confident in the beginning, and their conversation, which he references as being magical, was dry and unromantic. So I was fairly confident that when he showed up, there was going to be no romantic connection, from her, or I expected her to be with someone else rather than grieving over clearly a past boyfriend, and seeing that similar sort of concept unfold. I didn't really understand why she didn't like him. She says that she's grown up a lot in the past 7 years, sort of implying that she expects the fact that he hasn't. Which is sort of, I feel like I heard someone scream downstairs. We have a mice problem, so that's a bit of a concern. But as I was saying, she seems to be very doubtful of the idea that they should be together. Even to the point that she fully rejects them at one point. So I feel like if they were to be soulmates, I myself do not believe in soulmates, but if this film is fantasy, it could easily present the idea that soulmates are real and they're meant to be together. But I feel like the fact that she was so doubtful is sort of the implication that they aren't.
It's a really good point. A really,
It
really
sort of
good
leads
point.
me to believe that in the future, seeing this world go beyond this film, I think they would be together. But and I think they'd be a fine couple. I think they'd probably get on well, and they'd say this is the best possible scenario in this situation. But I don't think they don't scream soulmates to me.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think you can definitely look at it both ways. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I think maybe a second viewing will more, collect my thoughts better. I'm not too sure. And I think the fact that, like I sort of said, the fact that he still believes in that kind of idea, it's really charming to me. I really love that. I think it's a really smart move from the filmmakers to have that. And it really presents a really romantic vibe for the film, especially when, about at the 2/3 point, when he interacts with sort of the animatronic Mavis in the film. They're kind of like, robots who are kind of, help humanity with their errands and stuff like that. And it's a really charming scene in the film. It's probably one of my favorites in the film because you kind of see like that character, grow and develop more and stuff like that. And obviously there's it's a really heartwarming and also emotional moment as well in the film. But yeah, if I could describe this film in one word, it would be charming. It really blew me away. The fact that I think I recently watched the trailer for this, and it is very much action blockbustery style. But it's one of those cases where the movie is better than the trailer. I think, not to say that the trailer's bad, but I think this film is really charming as well. It's much more than your stereotypical apocalyptic blockbuster.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we've talked about the fact of, should they be together? Will they be together? And it's of course, I think very important to mention that of course you don't have to be with anyone that you don't want to be with.
Yeah.
But she sort of doesn't provide any reason. She says, that she likes him. Obviously, she finds him attractive because they share a very romantic kiss at the end of the film, and they used to be together. It seems that and she mentions that she is currently like grieving over the death of a old boyfriend, but I just feel that there's there's no obstacle to them at least being friends, but she seems to be happy to like show him the door. I feel like
I thought that was quite strange as well.
It just seems that she's like, oh, I should have told you not to come. You shouldn't have come, leave, basically.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you liked him enough to have him as your boyfriend and you don't want him to be your boyfriend now, why can't he be your friend?
Absolutely. I think that's a really, really great point you've just mentioned, buddy. And it kind of links into what we were kind of saying about like this movie does leave the door open for a potential sequel. And it kind of gets me thinking, would you like to see a
I have
potential?
I have been told that they've seen the mouse, by the way.
Oh,
I have
really?
just
Oh,
been,
man.
yeah.
It's loose.
My door is closed, I think. So
Yeah.
my room is fortress like. There's
Hopefully
quite a
it's not
firm
a
shutting
giant
door.
mouse in the vein of this film.
Oh, it was the one I saw the other day was massive.
Oh man. Well, keep us posted during the episode if that does
Okay.
happen. But yeah, it kind of got me thinking, like, would you like to see a sequel? Because I definitely think there could be room for one, or maybe a potential TV show on Netflix or something. Where's your head at for that one?
Well, I feel that in the grand scheme of this universe, obviously their little romance is inconsequential to the sort of context of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think beyond this film, I don't know that I care enough about Amy and Joel's romance to see a film about that. But I do see a bit of potential in sort of a Last of Us style spin-off with the characters of Clyde and Minnow, because
Mm-hmm.
I quite settled into the child actor's performance, who played Minnow, and I feel like Michael Rooker really has a star quality and a charm
He
that I
does.
think
He
could carry a
absolutely does.
film that's a bit like Logan, sort of reluctantly adopting this child and having to take them to safety. Either
Mm-hmm.
go back a few years or show their journey after they've left Joel.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any potential in that?
I absolutely do. I actually think the Michael Rooker character and as well, he really reminded me of like Tallahassee from Zombieland as
Oh
well.
yeah,
And I think the fact that the movie really shocked me in the sense that they split ways. Obviously, Joel and Minnow, and what's Michael Rooker's character's name again?
Clyde.
Clyde. Like they split ways like halfway through, and you expect that maybe they'll resurface to
Yeah,
help them fight at the end, or maybe they'll be the ones that perish or something. They're never seen again until like the final final like 5 seconds. It kind of got me thinking, like,
yeah,
I think that's a really smart move because it kind of got me in such a short space of time that they're on screen. It made me feel such like an affinity for the characters. I actually really missed them more on the screen, and it kind of got me thinking. It really invested me in that world to think that shit, like, this is such like an open landscape where it's so rare that humans interact with each other. So it was kind of like it kind of got me thinking, like, it was almost as if like fate had brought them all together, so to speak. And I kind of was a little bit upset, but also kind of happy that they weren't shown again because it really showed the importance of those characters in the film.
mhm.
I absolutely loved it. I absolutely love those characters, especially Michael Rooker. I mean, he's amazing, isn't he? He's so good.
Yeah, and you sort of mentioned the expectation that you maybe thought they would arrive back in the third act, to maybe sort a
Mm-hmm.
problem or whatever.
Yes.
And I'm just thinking about it. I think it would have been insane if it had turned out that they were somehow, the villains. Of course, you
Yeah.
can't be,
Yes. Yes.
you can't, really in this world where the monsters are like non-communicative. You can't really have an alliance with the monsters. In a sort of like Patrick Dempsey in the Transformers film, kind of vibe. Uh, you know, so
What a
obviously
reference.
you can't be a villain in that manner. So this film sort of had to work around that to give a human antagonist. But I feel like the third act is where this film is the only part of this film that I had potential criticisms, and it was really this sort of out of place turnaround with that villain, because within 5 minutes of meeting him, he's the villain, and then that's the final act.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like
It's really
from the
rushed.
moment that you meet that man, and then they sort of carry out this attempt at a twist. Within 20 minutes, like the film's over.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if you really wanted that drama and sort of that turnaround, it would have needed to have been with a character that was at least referenced or maybe seen throughout the film to that point. If it had turned
Yeah.
out, he was maybe a part of the colony that he was part of with the people that he loved. It turns out that they're actually bad guys,
Yeah.
and that they just hadn't turned him yet, or
Agreed.
the Clyde and Minnow had maybe been antagonistic figures. I just feel
Yeah.
like that maybe would have been a bit more of a surprise.
I would have maybe liked if the film went down the road as in, along with Clyde and Minnow, Joel meets a really lovely girl like his own age, where like he either has to choose between Amy and her, and then he ends up Amy, but realizes that she, like, when she rebuffs him, the original girl was his soulmate all along. I would have liked that idea, and that's kind of like the 500 Days of Summer dynamic, I suppose, isn't it? Where like he
Yeah.
thinks it's one when it's the other. But I think maybe I think maybe one potential way that the film could have went for me that could have potentially improved towards that third act if they scrap sort of the Amy character completely, not necessarily Jessica Henwick's role. I think maybe you could have maybe the Joel character is sick of being in the bunker without a girlfriend, and he just leaves the bunker with no destination in sight. He just wants to find like a girl in the wilderness or something, or in the apocalypse, and it ends up being Jessica Henwick. I think that's maybe a better idea than having her character who you build an affinity with off screen, and then she kind of rebuffs him. It made me dislike Jessica Henwick's character a lot, actually, towards the end of the film. Whereas I think if you just have her be a character that doesn't pre-exist in that universe, I think that's maybe a better alternative. I don't know.
Yeah, it definitely, you know, removes the potential projection, because we see the relationship build instead of just hearing about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I do feel like I feel like this situation, you know, obviously the you know the sort of script writing 101 is, you know, show don't tell, and you know, I really do feel like we heard a lot more about you know, Amy and Joel's relationship than we saw. So I do agree with you, maybe you know, because he does sort of, you know, say to people, you know, whenever they ask him, why are you out here, you know, he says, I'm going to find a girl. But you know, I feel like I agree with you. If he had just said, you know, I'm looking for a relationship, that equally, you know, would have been motivation to leave the bunker.
Absolutely.
A character that we haven't talked about in this film is Boy, played by Hero the dog, and this is by far the best dog that I've ever seen on film. There's one moment right after a monster attack, you know, the queen monster, you know, there's a sequence right before you know, Joel, you know, tells him to leave, and after the monster attack, he's physically shaking.
Yes,
and I was just like, wow.
It's
because
absolutely amazing.
you know, there was recently a film with Harrison Ford, you know, where he was co-lead with the dog, but the dog was, you know, completely CGI, and it was, you know, a guy running around in like, you know, a green screen suit.
Yeah.
So I looked it up, and I was like, this dog is like, the performance here is masterful. And you know, the moment where he shakes, I was like, is this CGI? I was like, if it's CGI, it's the best CGI I've ever seen, and it's not.
Yeah,
and I was astounded.
It kind of got me thinking, like, surely there should be like an Oscars for pets or movies or something. Surely, like, that dog is amazing. On the subject of the dog, I actually think we see that Boy's owner is remained anonymous. Maybe if the film could have went down the road that Boy's owner is an attractive young lady, and that Joel builds a relationship with, I think up to be a potential.
She likes wearing a nice red dress, so I mean, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, that dog.
I did think that was maybe going to play into it, because I was like, well, why is he so attached? Because of course, you know, he would love his owner, but I felt like it was sort of a Chekhov's gun to have him so attached to this specific red dress. You know, because you know, if you know, if somehow you've managed to survive, I don't know why you have an intact red dress. You know, because surely you didn't like peel that off her dead body because it's intact. So you know, you would think, you know, if you had access to all her clothes, you know, what was the attachment to that dress specifically? So I thought, you know, whenever he said, oh, you know, Amy loves dogs, I thought it might turn out it was Amy's dog, but I was like, that's a bit too, you know, on the nose, a bit too, like, you know, neat. With like, oh, you know, everybody connects, you know, that would have been a bit too far. But yeah, I was sort of like, oh, maybe there will be a nice young lady, you know, who he shares this dog with.
I thought the dog was like the real focal point of the film for me. I think that's where the film really takes off, with that dog. I say where the character is introduced. That sounds so silly because it's a dog, but you know what I mean. And that dog is incredible. Like, whoever trained that dog, massive kudos to them. They did an amazing job.
Yeah, I think that is the best feat of the film, because, you know, this film, you know, sort of the genres it combines creates an original film, but like the sum of its parts, you know, when you take away, like, obviously the survival genre isn't original, the romance isn't original. But you know, when you add all of those elements together, it does create something fresh. And then when you inject, you know, the dog into it's so stupid, but like the dog just does feel so integral to the success of the film. Like, you know, the film is only an hour and 50 minutes long, so I feel like if you take the dog out, you take out a lot of the warmth and the depth. And I think
you do,
you know, I think giving him a human to interact with throughout the entire film would have been a bit of a bridge too far, because then it sort of detracts from being his film. But a dog is the perfect companion, because you can speak to them without it seeming insane.
And
but
without that,
you know, it's not a human taking the spotlight away from you.
Yeah, 100%. It allows the Joel character to vent a bit more about like what he's on this mission to find his soulmate, and I thought it was a really smart move rather than have a human companion as well. Plus, it actually provides for some really great moments, like the way the dog interacts with something CGI that doesn't actually exist. You know, there's one shot that springs to mind. You know, they're hid behind a tree, and then the queen worm or millipede or whatever it is, like is you know, like, coming into the shot. Like the dog is like, and do you know when like Joel has to hold on to the dog's muzzle just in case like it barks or something? Like it's so well done. It's so incredible. And yeah, it broke my heart when the dog left. I thought that was going to be it for the rest of the film in a similar sense to, you know, Clyde and Minnow. But I'm glad he returned. Glad he returned.
So we're told that it's been 7 years since the inciting incident of the apocalypse, and it just shocks me that in only 7 years they've managed to adjust to the smell. Because this man goes on a 7-day journey across 85 miles and changes his shirt once only because a monster needed it, to
Yeah, I
lead another
know.
monster away
Yeah,
from them.
yeah.
Like they must all be absolutely disgusting. Like,
Mm-hmm.
even if obviously Amy is in charge of a compound that is by the beach, but even swimming in salt water, like that's not that's you're all disgusting. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
like I could not live like that.
yeah. I know.
You hear back to like the hundreds of years ago, obviously, bathing didn't exist, and people were like throwing shit into the streets, but
Yeah,
that was just the smell. Like, but I feel like if just suddenly one day there was just like just a turn where people don't shower anymore and the smell is insane. Like I just don't know how they live like that comfortably. I
yeah.
don't think you could create a romance when everybody stinks that bad.
Yeah, I know. I know. It kind of got me thinking though on that sort of train of thought, buddy. You know, we've compared this film to Zombieland. Obviously, that film's environment is not ideal to live in either. But I'd actually, I'd definitely rather live in this universe, even though you may stink, rather than like a zombie apocalypse or something. This apocalypse, out of every apocalypse I've seen in the film, seems the least bad. Like it seems okay. Like I think,
Yeah,
I think it seems manageable to a degree.
yeah, because I mean, yeah, it's because Boy the dog is there. It proves that not all animals mutated into these big monsters. So it might not be as high a population of monsters as we think. And clearly they can comfortably hide in these bunkers. With few attacks. In 7 years, they say that they have lost some people, but I presume most of that was sort of on the hunt for supplies rather than in the bunker itself. So I feel
Yeah,
like a large majority of them can live quite comfortably,
yeah,
whereas,
absolutely.
I don't think you're gonna, if you're bitten by a zombie, you then become a zombie, and you have to then exist as a zombie. But I feel like just an instant death by a big creature
Yeah,
is a better end to meet. At
absolutely.
least
It is.
the
It
threat
absolutely is.
is the threat is I think a more appealing death.
No, it is. It absolutely is for sure. Any other points from you?
So yeah, so throughout the film, we've talked about the monster attacks, and I just wondered, how did you feel about how often he actually comes up against monsters? Because I would say frequently within this genre, people say, oh, they spend a lot on the CGI of the monsters, but the monsters just don't show up enough. But with this case, I actually would consider that it feels a bit too often. You sort of mentioned the moment that he has with the robot. Whenever just hit him, the robot and Boy are left alone, and those moments, I think, are the best within the film, because
I
those sort of
agree. Yeah.
quiet human moments really allow Dylan O'Brien to act. And, I think there's a lot of emotion there that just isn't within the more
Yeah.
generic fight scenes that you see in any monster film. Like, I just feel like throughout the film, there's at least, just with himself, there's at least three action sequences that he has with monsters, and then, ones at the beginning and the end, and with Clyde and Minnow. So I'd say, they have at least six monster fights, and I just feel it's a bit excessive in a 2 hour, in a hour and
Yeah.
40 film.
I honestly, I can understand where you come from, buddy, for sure. Like for me, I actually thought it was really well paced in that regard. And I actually think, when you think about it, Dylan O'Brien is in every scene of this film. Like he carries this so
Yeah.
well. I actually think he'd be a great Spider-Man if Tom Holland hadn't be in a universe where Tom
See,
Holland wasn't Spider-Man.
yeah, I had this thought because he was one of the contenders with like Asa Butterfield and Charlie Plummer, but I just don't see it. I
Fair
think it's
enough.
because I think he's too cool and attractive. Like because Tom Holland is obviously an attractive man, but there's a nerd there that's
Yeah.
visible. Like I think
Yes.
I think
Agreed.
you can picture him as being a nerd. I can't picture a nerd Dylan O'Brien. Like he'd stick on a pair of glasses and you just like it would
Yeah.
just be unconvincing.
Yeah. I think in terms of the monster fights, yeah, an argument definitely can be made. There is one too many for sure. And I think it definitely comes in more into play towards the end, which definitely feels a bit rushed, especially with the villain dynamic as well. But for me, I thought it was really, really well handled. I actually would have liked more moments where it's just the humans, to be honest, just interacting. I think it makes for some of the more emotional spots in the film, definitely.
Mm. And a moment that, is clearly intending to, sort of draw on the emotion of the audience is where there are messages written by Joel's colony on the back of his map. And I did think the message scene was sweet, but I just feel that it would have been a lot more poignant if we had had a bit more time with them. Because he's clearly emotional over how much he loves them and how much they love him. But it's an hour and 40 film. This could easily be 2 hours if you wanted to add in
Agreed.
10
Absolutely.
minutes more of world
Agreed.
building. With the emotion that he shares with the colony, because he says that they're his family and that he loves them, but we never really see that.
That's why I'm still holding out for a sequel, bud, to maybe develop that relationship a bit more. Like at the start, I was a little bit hesitant towards the colony. I thought they were a little bit mean to him, but obviously when you see these reveals and stuff, and by the end, they're really excited to see him back. And I think the fact that he returns to them is also really sweet as well. I think it makes for a really nice dynamic there for sure.
Did you have anything further on the film, Matthew?
Nothing for me, but I'd love to hear your rating. If we're gonna do massive hit or piece of shit, are we?
Yes. So the critical consensus on this was widely that it's a fun but forgettable film, and quite honestly, I think that's a fairly apt description. I think a few months down the line, I'll say, yeah, I had fun with that, but if you asked me specific questions about the plot or the characters, I think I would struggle. But as I was watching it, I was like, I really enjoyed this. Even the third act that feels a bit detached from the rest of the film isn't bad. It was just sort of a bit too quick of a turn that we see within the film.
Yeah.
So I will happily give this film a massive hit.
Love it. What would you give it out of 10, bud, if you're gonna rate it out of 10 as well?
So I think every performance is great, but the romantic co-lead of the film, Jessica Henwick, of course, is dealing with a loss within the film. So maybe that influences her decision to sort of refute the advances of Joel. But I just feel that he is, she says that it's the most romantic thing anyone has ever done, and she clearly seems to like him. And I would say death just seems to be all around, and it seems that you would grasp onto any kind of love that you could receive within that world, because you're so desperate for any human connection. So it did sort of make me dislike the character a bit more, as you said. So if you take that into account, that the film sort of didn't manage to make me have a positive impression of both of the main characters. But damn, that dog, man.
Dog,
It's the best dog I've ever seen in any film, and it's not usually a breed that would appeal to me either. But I was like, damn, that dog is cute.
So cute.
I don't know, so just everything he did, he was adorable. So I don't know, that adds massive points for me. And it was something different. It was something fresh. I thought it would be a bit boring but tolerable, and it was never boring. It was always exciting, tense. So I would give the film an 8.5/9 out of 10.
Love it. I agree with you, buddy. For me, it's definitely a massive hit. I really love this film. I'm really glad you suggested to watch it, buddy. It's one of my favorites of 2020, for sure. One of the better ones. And obviously Dylan O'Brien, really great. Jessica Henwick, of course, amazing. And I really like the fact that it is a romance about soulmates and the one and that idea. And I think it's a really charming film. So yeah, I think for me it's a 9 out of 10 for sure. I absolutely love this film. Really good. But yeah.
I'm having a look at our Overdue reviews. So I'll shout them out to you. There's Mulan. I think we were both of the consensus it was fine. Then the third act was a bit shaky, but fine.
Yeah.
There's I mean, yeah, there aren't too many of them. Tenet, I thought was an absolute waste of time. I thought it was woeful. I think you were a bit more generous on it, weren't you?
Yeah, I did quite like it.
I think Mank we reviewed a little late, but not enough to be construed as an overdue review. But I think the New Mutants there was New Mutants and Bill and Ted, which I think we both agreed were all right. They were fine. They were both massive hits, just because we have to commit to one extreme.
Yeah.
Neither were pieces of shit, which I think most people expected the New Mutants to be.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to the 2020 films that we reviewed recently, I think they're all admirable. None of them were terrible, except Tenet.
In your opinion, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
2020. It was just one of those years. It was just average. I think there's no films that would go into my top 10 of all time or anything like that. But like Love and Monsters is probably my favorite one of the year. I would say.
How many would you say that you loved?
Probably just Wonder Woman 84 and Love and Monsters, I think.
Because I would say
What about
that
you?
there was two for me. So the first would be Uncle Frank, which was a film that was released on Amazon Prime, starring Paul Bettany and Sophia Lillis. I don't know if you heard about this at
I
all.
hadn't, dude. I hadn't. No.
It's a film about a closeted gay man played by Paul Bettany, and he has to return home to his sort of like very conservative household for the funeral of his father, and it's sort of his relationship with his niece, played by Sophia Lillis, and how she sort of brings out a different side of him, and it was honestly it was a beautiful film, and it was really
Nice
tragic,
one. Yeah.
and I'd highly recommend it. It was my favorite
Yeah.
film of last year,
Lovely.
and I can't every time someone asks me about particular films, I'll maybe mentally list them, and I always say that there's one that's number two, but I genuinely can't remember what it is. Like I can't remember what it is.
It's weird because Birds of Prey was also 2020. That's maybe not. It's not. I didn't love that film, but it was a good one as well. There was no real car crashes, at least in 2020, for me anyway. There was no
Except
disasters.
Tenet. Yeah.
But likewise, there was no ones that were like perfect at all. Love and Monsters is probably the closest it
I'm
gets to
I'm
that.
genuinely struggling. Like there is a second film that I really loved, and I can't think what it is. I was like, we must
Must
have
be quite
reviewed it.
obscure.
No, I don't think it was. Like I'm gonna like turn myself insane thinking about this,
It wasn't
but
Wonder Woman, was it? No.
no, no. Like reflecting on Wonder Woman, I do think whenever we left the cinema, my dad said, well, that was a mess, but it was a fun mess. And I sort of,
It's
I
true.
was I
Yeah.
was very hesitant to agree with that, but yeah, on reflection, I'm like, yeah, narratively, it is a bit messy, but I did think it was a bit of fun. But
Yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't say I loved it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm just not going to remember this, but I think given the circumstances and the sort of few that were actually allowed to release, I think any film that was going to release in 2022 that a studio thought was a guaranteed hit still hasn't come out.
Yeah.
So like really when we see No Time to Die or Black Widow, those are 2020 films. So we sort of need to take that into account, I guess, when we
That's
watch those
true.
films.
That's true.
That was what the filmography of 2020 was meant to be.
Yeah, that's true, buddy. That's true. But yeah, thanks very much, everyone, for watching this little overdue review. Calum and I really do appreciate that massively. And stay tuned later on this week where we're going to be reviewing, of course, Riverdale and things like that, and our Disney podcasts as well. So yeah, hope you guys are all safe and well. Hope your family and friends are all safe and well. Take care and bye bye.
Bye.